Well, hello, my name's Louise. A very warm welcome to my channel. It is my October wrap-up that you have tuned into. A warm welcome if you're a returning viewer, and an equally warm welcome if you're viewing for the very first time. And as you can see, I'm just gleaming with the prospect of talking to you about the books I've read this month. I haven't read quite as many as I did in September, but maybe more chunkstery type books. Maybe that's something to do with the time of year, I think. But my reading got off to an absolutely flying start because I started the month with Rosanna Pike's A Little Trickery. Now, this book, Simon Savage, my son, almost forced into my hands on many occasions in bookshops. I finally submitted over the summer, and boy, am I glad that I did. I just thought this was a thoroughly delightful read, and that isn't to undermine it, because I think it's brilliantly written as well. So it's the story of little Tib. I don't know why I say little. No, she is very little. She's sort of angelic looking and fragile. Little Tib Ingleby, who is sort of growing up in the I think it's about 1500 in the English countryside. Her life starts off in the east of the country, and then she travels west. In fact, much of this novel, the sort of second part of it, takes place a mere 20 miles, in fact less than that, I think, from where I'm sitting right now, in a western town called Leominster, almost on the border with Wales. Anyway, that's kind of by the by. But actually, it did make me realise how wonderful it is sometimes to read literature about places that you are familiar with. So I did appreciate that. But anyway, in fact, it's made me want to go back to have a good look at Leominster Church. I must get around to doing it. So Tib and her mother and her newly born, very young baby sister are itinerants. They're travelling round, vagrants in fact, travelling round the countryside, trying to make ends meet, often by stealing things. Her mother often sort of, sells her body in order to survive. So they are living on the margins. They don't have a home. And sadly, her mother dies, and Tib is given the responsibility of looking after this tiny, very sick baby. And as you can imagine, it doesn't go terribly well. I've got to be really careful I don't put spoilers in. Now, the wonderful thing about this book is you're kind of seeing things through Tib's eyes, and she is the most fantastic character. She's got a wonderful naivety to her, but like a lot of sort of young people, her naivety is profoundly wise, and she's trying to make sense of the world and its injustices, and to, as a reader, you really want her to keep that freshness throughout all her trials and tribulations. And I think she would definitely use the word tribulations to describe her experiences. And she ends up on the coast and meets this character called Ivo, who I utterly loved. He goes through a very interesting transition through the course of the story. And there is a lot in this story about concealment, about not being your true self, about society not allowing you to be, about survival, but also lots about hope. And it's funny, it's witty, it's really sort of sharp. So I'd describe it as a kind of gallop through England in the 1500s. And you meet a whole cast of characters. They're all sort of actors and magicians and troubadours, and that's probably not the right word, but I think if you love historical fiction, this has sort of brought a kind of new vibrancy to the genre, I would say. I think was Rosanna Pike's debut, so I'm really hoping that there is more to come. And of course, it's got the wonderful Women's Prize sticker on, which just says it all, doesn't it, really? It made the long list. Anyway, there we go. I really enjoyed A Little Trickery. And then my book of the month for October was Rodham. So if you want to find out a bit more about it, you can have a look at my video where I cover my feelings on this book. I wasn't particularly expecting to enjoy it, even though I've read other things by Curtis Sittenfeld. I've got American Wife somewhere on the shelf, and a couple of other books, I think. And American Wife is probably one of my favourite books. But this book, I was approached with some trepidation, because I wasn't sure that she could, even though Curtis Sittenfeld's a very accomplished writer, I wasn't sure that she could pull the concept off. So the concept is, Rodham, of course, is Hillary Clinton. Rodham was her maiden name. And the concept is, what if Hillary had never married Bill Clinton? And the novel opens with the early days of their relationship. So up to a certain point, it follows the trajectory of Hillary Clinton's real life, and then sort of separates when she doesn't actually marry Bill. And I love this. It gave me a real insight into American politics. I think it's illuminating in terms of thinking about, the what-ifery around, if women were able to navigate their way up the very greasy political pole, not just in America, but in other parts of the world as well, certainly here in the UK, with greater ease. What would that mean? What type of woman do you have to be in order to gain power? Can a sort of fairly plain, as presented in this novel, fairly plain, hardworking, quite geeky, not necessarily lots of charisma, can that type of person actually achieve in American politics, or even Western politics, I would say. So yeah, I found all of that really fascinating, and I couldn't put it down. There was a lot of sort of what I thought was quite gratuitous sex to start with. In fact, quite a bit of it. But then I thought, actually, no, it's not, because it's a novel about Bill Clinton as well, as much as it is about Hillary. So I kind of felt that needed to be there. I've tried really hard to find out what the reception of this novel was from the sort of the Clinton stall, as it were, but I couldn't really pick up anything. So I don't know whether I've missed it, not found it. I read a few reviews which were very mixed actually on the reception of this book. But for me, it was a real winner, and I just couldn't put it down. Next up, I read The House of Fortune, and I read this. In fact, I read Rodham as well, as because I'm trying to catch up on my prompts for the Savage prompts of 2025. As usual, this time of year, I suddenly realised I'm a bit behind, but actually it suits me well, because this is a time of year when I tend to do a lot of kind of free reading. I can just range my shelves, as it were. And the prompt was a book with a light source on the cover, and as you can just see, there is actually a fire there. I couldn't believe it. I only had 2 books that I could find with a light source on the cover on my shelves. I was really shocked by that, because I've got rather a large TBR. You can't see it from here, but it's looking at me. So this is The House of Fortune by Jessie Burton, much loved writer of mine. And I read The Miniaturist many, many years ago, and I'm really grateful to the prompts for pushing me towards reading this sequel. And I was trying to work out why I hadn't read it. I mean, it's a beautiful edition. Simon bought it me. It's got a lovely, it's signed by Jessie herself. And I don't know why it sat on my shelves for several years, because I loved The Miniaturist. But actually, I think it's probably because, again, I think this book had really mixed reviews, and I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to ruin the memory of the original novel. But actually, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Again, I couldn't put it down. It was exactly, it's sort of got a real gothic feel to it. It's 1705, it's Amsterdam, it's returning to the characters that we knew from The Miniaturist. But actually, she's done a corking job, because I think you could read this book in its own right. You don't have to have read The Miniaturist, although I think you get more out of it, probably. Always you do, don't you, if you know a bit more about the characters. It was delightful to go back to meet Otto and Nella, and what's the wonderful housekeeper called? Is it Constanza? And this is the story, really, I think, mainly of Thea and Nella. So Thea is Marin's daughter. She's now 18, or just turning 18. She's obsessed with the theatre. She's quite a sort of, for want of a better word, spunky young woman. And she's quite disobedient, really. She's just my sort of heroine. She's her aunt Nella, who's brought her up, is determined to get her married off, because the household is suffering severe financial struggle. You've got the added complication of the fact that Nella has dark skin, because her father is black, and it's 1705 and it's Amsterdam, and society is very judgmental. There are some really awkward scenes in here. But what I love about this book, what I loved about this book, is that both Nella and Thea sort of are kind of growing up almost together. Her aunt has lived a very confined life, and I think during the course of this novel learns so much more about herself and the people that she lives with than she knew at the start of it, even though she's in her 30s. And I thought, yeah, that's true. You know, during the course of your life, you go through phases where your attitude towards things around you can really shift and change. And I also think the experience of bringing up children can alter you tremendously. And this is at a point where Thea actually ends up teaching Nella as much as Nella has taught Thea, which I really, really loved about this book. So there's a lot about generational relationships, I think, in here, and the way that the young can misunderstand the old, and the old can equally really seriously misunderstand the young, and how difficult it is to communicate when somebody is, you know, in their late or even mid-teens. So I really enjoyed that thread throughout the novel. The little miniatures make a reappearance. I don't think that's a spoiler, so that was lovely to see those pop back up. And it's just the atmosphere of the house, the atmosphere in Amsterdam, the canals, and actually we sort of go beyond Amsterdam for a short period as well in this novel, into the sort of the countryside on the outskirts, which again I really appreciated. So yeah, a lot to love about this. Really recommend it if you haven't read it, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are if you have. And then I read Gunflower, which was gifted to me by Simon. I think maybe Christmas last year on my birthday, to Louise, and for short stories LJM. So this is Laura Jean McKay, or McKay, I'm not sure. This is an Australian author, and this is a collection of short stories. And he did warn me. Simon absolutely raved about this book, and he did warn me that the stories are really quite odd and unusual. And I would totally agree with that. This is a book that really threw me out of my comfort zone. And it was a real mixed bag for me, which short story collections usually are in my experience. So some of the stories I thought were utterly brilliant and really sort of made me think. There was a fantastic story about an abortion ship moored off the coast of America, and about an American sort of campaigner putting herself forward to go to this ship and have an abortion. And I thought that story was really provocative. Made me think a lot, and very sort of pertinent to the times. There was another story that I really loved about a sort of COVID world. It was like COVID land. And it was a family who had kind of broken the rules and left the city and gone to stay by the beach somewhere. And the locals were really, you know, not welcoming for obvious reasons. And this fantastic relationship between one of the women and an older man, and it was all to do with swimming in the sea, which, I really enjoy, and I could kind of see the pull of the waves in that situation. Really dark story, but very interesting. But some of the stories just, I have to be honest, maybe it was just me the time I was reading them, but just like I read the story and I really didn't quite know what I'd read. So yeah, I felt a really mixed bag. The other thing I would say, boy, can this woman write. Oh my goodness. I think the writing is beautiful, but sometimes, as I say, I wasn't quite sure what I'd read about, but there we are. Then I picked up The Innocent. I had a train journey and I didn't want to take a heavy book, and this is quite a slim volume. This is by David, I never know how to say his name, Szalay. One of his books has been shortlisted this year, Flesh, for the Booker Prize, and I've read at least one of his books and really enjoyed it before. So Flesh is one that I'm going to get to, but probably when it comes out in paperback. This was written many years ago. It's from his back catalogue. I picked it up in a charity shop, I think. I really like the cover. It's really atmospheric. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. This is a book with a big brain. You've got to sort of concentrate, but I like that every now and then, to read something that's kind of pushing my intellect. It covers it's about a KGB spy in Russia. And I found that fascinating, reading about Russia from the 1920s through to the 1970s. What this book does is it gives you a really good overview of the sort of Russian history, particularly sort of social history and political with a small p history. It opens with this, you shift between the present, i.e. the 1970s, and the past. And the lead character is reminiscing. He's called Alexander. And he's reminiscing about this experience that he had when he was a much younger officer. And he's now really quite high up in the KGB. And he's living, I think, in some sort of provincial town. And he goes out to this lodge to interview a doctor who has a patient, in inverted commas, because this patient is not allowed to leave the institution, who the KGB suspect of having been a Nazi sympathiser. And this patient, they want to find out whether there's some suspicion arisen about whether his brain injury, which is what he has, is genuine or not. Now, when he gets there and meets the prisoner's had part of his head shot, literally part of his head is missing, it was shot off. So on the surface of it, you can't imagine how this, did I say prisoner, patient, whatever he is, inmate, you can't imagine that he would be able to fake anything. You know, he can't really speak. He's got the, he can do things like recite the alphabet, the sorts of things he would have learned as a child, but he can't have a conversation. And then by the shenanigans, the doctor says absolutely no, this man can't be released, he can't be moved, he can't be transferred. Well, I'm not going to say because it would spoil it. So you've got all of that going on, but you've also got, you know, it's got the essence of a really cool spy film as well, because there's a really interesting relationship that Alexander has with a woman. There's we also see his relationship with his own wife and his brother. You know, that's all really fascinating, this kind of web of relationships that he's weaving himself round. And lots of wonderful descriptions of driving in a larder and snow. And and the other thing I loved about this is that David, I can't say it, Szalay, I don't know how to say it, but he has, I really ought to look it up because it must be online somewhere. It should be easy for me, shouldn't it? But he's peppered this book with moments of, great sporting moments. So we've got the Olympics, we've got chess contest, we've got a football match, and all of I'd forgotten just how political sport was in the 60s and 70s when Russia was sort of opening up a little bit more. And seeing it from the Russian perspective, you see, that was really fascinating. So yeah, I thoroughly recommend this, but you need to be in a space where you've got a bit of brain room. And finally, I wanted to share Hollie McNish's Slug. I think she's McNish, actually, not McNish. Now, I went to see Hollie perform not long ago. I am a massive, massive fan. I would describe her as a performance poet. I'm not sure that's how she would describe herself. And Slug is a collection of her essays and poetry. And she writes about all things women, really. But that sounds limiting. It's not. But what she wants to do is what she sort of, through her work, she's kind of campaigning. I would say she is a protest poet, because she is trying to normalise things like periods, things like using the word vulva, etc., etc. And she does it with joy, with wit. She can have me crying with laughter. She can have me crying with frustration. She can have me crying with anger and genuine sorrow. So the first section of this book focuses on her relationship with her grandma and her grandma's death. But she also cycles through all sorts of interesting contemporary issues. I'll just read you one of her poems just to give you a flavour. But I absolutely adore her. I can't lie. If you're on Instagram, she's Hollie Poetry on Instagram, and you get a dose of joy every few days. She'll write a poem about something. So she actually went to Cambridge University to study. And actually, no, I'm not going to read that one. I'm going to read a different one because I've just mentioned her grandma. Things my grandmothers warned me to conceal. And I can so relate to this. And then she has in italics, "For your own sake, my darling," which I think is possibly her quoting her gran. "Your legs, my love," they said, "and your breasts, my love," they said, "and your bra straps, and your backbone, and your tiptoes," they said, "and your tongue, my love," they said, "and your womb, my love," they said, "and your footprints, and your blood spills, and your brain, my love," they said, "and your arms, my love," they said, "and your scars, my love," they said, "and your screams, and your daydreams, and your learning, and your longing, and your lust, and your hunger, and your anger, and your thirst, and your death, my love, and your life, my love, and your birth." And that just, oh my God, for me, just captures, you know, the invisibility of women, or how women have been, you know, through the ages encouraged to be invisible. And, you know, that's a sort of slightly maybe pessimistic poem, but there is a lot of joy in here as well. And I really, all the essays, don't let the word essay put you off, because they are thoroughly entertaining and interesting, and really make you think about modern, the role of women, and not the role of women, the situation of women in the contemporary world. So there we have it. That was my October wrap up. Please let me know what you've been reading in October. And I'm already curling up. November has just begun, and I've curled up with a fantastic, my first, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but my first book of November. Well, I started reading it yesterday. It's quite a tome, and I will probably finish it today. That tells you everything you need to know. Anyway, take care, everyone. Very, very happy reading. And yeah, look forward to reading your comments down below. Take care. Bye.